Everybody, thank you for joining us. My name is Anthony Weinkoff. I'm one of the directors and co-founders of Embrace Tutoring and Educational Services. We work with a number of students from around the country, offering diagnostic tests, private tutoring, as well as college counseling and essay writing, which Charles here is going to weigh in on all of the sort of understandings and the considerations that are going into college counseling, especially this year, given COVID, as well as so many other kind of uncertainties. I do want to quickly say that if you have individual questions, please put them in the chat feature. It's usually easiest rather than us having to go back and forth. That way you guys can sort of see our screen. Feel free to ask whatever you like. We'll do our best to kind of weigh in and offer an honest perspective. A brief background regarding myself is I was actually a former Stanford faculty liaison years ago. So I was literally in the admissions room as the voting and such took place. We're going to walk you through the basics, and then at the same time, I've also worked at the high school, private school level, where working within the admissions teams as well as the college counselors teams. So I've sort of been on both sides of the table, and I hope that what Charles and I are able to kind of portray to you tonight is just make you feel a little bit more at ease in terms of the college admissions process in general. So before we get started, Charles, would you like to say anything?
Sure. Good evening. Thank you, and thank you, Anthony. My name is Charles Feiner, and I have 23 years of experience working on college campuses as Director of Campus Life, and I was responsible for incoming first-year students, and then I was a high school guidance counselor for 12 years. So I had the pleasure of working with the high school students as they were applying to college, and then as soon as the students started college, I worked with them at the college setting.
Great. So one quick reminder, as things are going on, obviously we're going to be touching on the major elements in terms of college admissions in general, but also at the same time, as questions arise, please feel free to put them in the chat feature. That way it makes it easier for you guys. And at the same time, we definitely encourage you to visit embracetutoring.com, just in terms of general content, emails, and subscriptions. We send out a number of things from how to ask for your letter of recommendation, as well as tips for college essays. We do have a number of things featured within our social media services. Usually I would say the Facebook page is a little bit more, Facebook and Instagram is geared a little bit more towards the content emails, as well as things that you as parents would find informational. Our YouTube channel does have a number of free practice tests, as well as question by question breakdowns and sample problems. So if your students are studying for the SAT or the ACT, we would highly recommend that they take a look. And at the same time, we completely empathize that there might be some questions you might have left over even after this this webinar. So if you'd like to speak to Charles or myself personally, you're more than welcome to give us a simple email, or feel free to just give me a phone call at the number provided here, or at the email at aweinkoff@embracetutoring.com. So feel free to give us a contact. I'd be happy to sort of walk you through the college admissions process as best as possible. Okay. Now, in general, what we aim to do at Embrace Tutoring and Educational Services is that we specialize in creating personalized academic roadmaps for our students, elementary through college, that are looking to essentially apply to the next chapter of their furthering education. We then match those students with experienced private tutors and college counselors as a way to really help them navigate the college admissions process, and also at the same time enhance their scores. We've been very blessed over the years to have multiple tutors and multiple facilities and working with hundreds of students. But obviously the goal in mind, or kind of the light at the end of the tunnel, is usually if our students are, let's say, applying to grad school or applying to college or applying even to the high school admissions. So working with individuals such as Charles really helps them to navigate that process of what are some major considerations as they're going through. Not only will you get a private tutor when working with Embrace, but you also get an individual to consult with regarding kind of which things you need to be aware of. And generally speaking, and something to take away from this presentation, and based upon my time working as a Stanford faculty liaison, the major things that colleges will typically take away when they're looking at a high school transcript would include your GPA and your course selection, meaning the strength of schedule or your academic rigor. They'll also look at your test scores, and your test scores will be built into what is called a quant score. And your test scores could include anything from your SATs, your ACTs, your subject tests, as well as your AP exams or dual enrollment or IB. Those things all get lumped into one major category. between your transcript, your GPA, and your test scores, which make up inevitably what they would refer to as your quant score. The major key point is that your quant score is actually used more often than not to determine your amount of merit-based aid. So if we're referring to scholarships specifically, and in some elements of like how to reduce the cost of college by doing well based upon merit-based aid, those are the two biggest factors that you want to pay attention to. Charles later on in the presentation is going to elaborate much more in terms of family budgeting as well as financial-based aid, which is like the FAFSA and the CSS profile. But the two major considerations you should be aware of in terms of merit aid would actually come from your transcript, your GPA, as well as your test scores. After those things, colleges are going to evaluate your extracurricular activities, which hopefully they will define as some way of a passion project, as something that you've dived deeper into and you found a way to give an impact to the local community. They're also going to use your letters of recommendation as well as your essays to develop a personality assessment. So what typically happens, and to sort of walk you through and inside the committee room, is your regional director is the first individual who typically come into contact with your application, and a regional director who's designated to that area of the country or that specific city. And it's usually the amount of regional directors assigned to an area totally depend on how many students are applying and population density and other things. But needless to say, what will happen is that you will apply, and typically it will come through the Common App. That's the most popular mechanism that students will typically use to apply now. And then that regional director will take your student's application based upon an initial filtering process, where it is usually test prep scores as well as your initial course load and course rigor and GPA as a who gets priority of who gets evaluated first. And then based off of those, the regional director or the admissions officer, to be fair, the admissions officer is going to go through the application and he or she is going to be circling highlight reels regarding that student. And the biggest things that they are looking to take away from that student are key personal qualities of kind of how they feel as though that student will be an impact to the community, how they'll be an impact academically, how they'll make an impact culturally, as well as how they'll make an impact, I would say, and beyond. Like, does that student have higher aspirations in terms of like an alumni, perhaps? So they're thinking about it long term. But they will evaluate your letters of recommendation. They'll evaluate your sort of going back real quickly, they'll evaluate your essays and your supplemental essays. And then they will also look at your transcript as well as your test prep scores. So based upon that key information there, and some passion projects, yes, it certainly depending on the level of selectivity of the school, based upon that information, they will then have a voting process. So for instance, when I was working out at Stanford, it was a number of us around the table. There was a projector kind of on the screen. There were a ton of snacks on the table, right? And so essentially what then happens is that we discuss the applicants as we're going through. It's really not that long per applicant, to tell you the truth, but some discussions are longer than others. And then we would essentially have anonymous clickers where we would vote on students as they're going through. Not everywhere does it anonymously, but for the most part, I would say, and definitely for the more selective schools. Now, another key question, and I'm going to turn it over to Charles, that we typically get is who is in the room during that voting process? And often it will be faculty from around the school. It would be like a dean of res life. It would be dean of academics. So it would be other individuals. It would be faculty liaisons or TAs. So it's going to be a good, I would say, mix of the school to try to best understand how you'll make an impact academically and how you'll make an impact culturally. So it's going to be several significant figures who have a strong impact and really a strong influence within the school, who are really going to be making that vote of majority of the students kind of coming through the voting process. The regional director who initially went through that student's application is usually the person who will stand and present on behalf of that applicant. So the regional director will kind of have the most in terms of say. I do want to quickly remind you guys, I do see a number of you asking questions in the kind of the question feature. If you put it in the chat feature, Charles and I will be able to answer you along the way as we're going through. If it's in the question feature, unfortunately, we would have to stop the presentation and kind of go in and out. So for efficiency's sake, if you can put it in the chat feature, it makes it a lot easier for us, okay? So we'll gladly, I'll take a look at that. And we will save time at the end, the last, I would say, 20 minutes or so. Charles and I are going to kind of do an open panel where we'll get through as much of it is. And also, finally, we will make this presentation available to you. We will make sure to send it off for if you're joining us this evening. So if we don't get through every little thing, it's okay, right? We're going to make sure that we make it available to you, and you're more than welcome to follow up with a simple email. Okay. All right. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Charles Feiner to discuss FAFSA as well as a number of other kind of budgeting for college.
Thank you. Let me just, first, for those of you just coming on, my name is Charles Feiner, and I have over 35 years of experience, both in colleges as well as guidance counselor in high schools. So, thank you for coming. I hope this is a productive webinar for you. These are the topics we are going to cover: college debt, making college more affordable, financial aid formulas, expected family contributions known as EFC, the different forms that need to be filled out, the FAFSA, CSS profile. We'll discuss the net price calculator, capturing private scholarships, and appealing financial aid awards. Then we'll go over to the application process, which Anthony was just talking about. We'll talk about increasing your admissions chances, the hazards of reach schools, geographic hook, and then showing the college some love. Now, all of these slides, this is the beginning of the process. For each one of these slides, we could give it an entire presentation on practically all of them. So why don't we get started? This is a quote from Fisk, the author of Fisk Guides to Colleges. Among the elite private schools, tuition is driven by what the market will bear. It's that simple. They charge a higher tuition because they can. These are the most expensive colleges. $70,000 is now the new normal, with University of Chicago hitting $80,000. As you can see from this chart, there is tuition, and then there's housing and additional expenses. So the colleges have gone up to the $70,000 range, and unfortunately it will continue the list price to go up. If you read the papers, discussions with your friends and families, everyone is speaking about college debt. Right now, there's over $1.5 trillion college debt, and what we want you is not to be part of that debt. And hopefully with some of the things that we're talking about tonight, that will start you on a good path. This is a ad that the students from NYU, the class of 2019, put in. Good education is a right to all, regardless of financial strength. We are against the amount of debt that students are forced to incur while studying at NYU. Now, you would think that the students and their parents, before they decided to go to NYU, they would have talked about the cost of college. Unfortunately, for most parents and students, that is not done until after they make a decision. So you are already one step ahead. And you saw that the average college price is going up. Don't let that scare you. It's not what the college cost. It's what the college will cost you. Why do I have a picture of a plane here? For the simple reason that college pricing is like airline pricing. Everyone pays a different price. It depends what time you reserve your ticket, how far in advance or how close to your departure. It depends on so many different factors. The same thing applies to college tuition. You have probably heard about school fit. Guidance counselors talk about safety schools, realistic schools, and reach schools. What they rarely talk about, though, is the financial fit, safety financial fit. College's safety is colleges where your savings and income are a comfortable fit with the college cost offers without any impact whatsoever to your lifestyle needs and choices. Then realistic, college is affordable with smart choices in student loans, borrowing, payment plans, and stretching a little in your lifestyle needs and choices. And reach, colleges that can only be possible with some sort of sacrifice or shifting to make it work financially. So where does this money come from besides the money that you are putting out there? There are four main sources of the money: the federal government grants, which is about 40%. Household income is what makes or breaks a family's chances for federal help. We'll go into all of these in more detail. Colleges, every college has its own criteria in terms of the monies that they would give you. Some give exclusively to need-based students, some to merit-based. State government grants, they impose formulas that hand out grants based on such factors as GPA, test scores, class ranks, as Anthony mentioned previously, and private scholarships, which is the smallest portion of money, but if you play it right, it could be a significant amount of money. Here is another quote: higher education in America is a big business. The college is trying to get you to pay the most amount of money. You are trying to pay the least amount. It can be very costly to assume that colleges are going to show you how to get the most aid. Colleges, it's a business. They hire consultants. They know as much as possible about your sons and daughters. They buy lists from College Board, ACT, from Naviance. When you click on that this is a college you're interested in, they will then know to send you information. This is the big form that most high schools speak about, the FAFSA. FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Even if one feels that they will not get any need-based money, it is essential that this form is filled out. Why? Because colleges don't want to leave any money on the table. When one fills out the FAFSA, the main thing that they get back from it is the expected family contribution, known as the EFC. And we are going to talk the next slide as far as what drives the EFC. The student's EFC, expected family contribution, is the minimum amount the student is expected to contribute towards the cost of the college. Your EFC will be a particular figure. That doesn't mean that that's the only monies that you will spend. So the FAFSA, how they base the EFC, the main criteria are the parent's income and assets, the student's income and assets, and they look upon the student's income and assets in a higher regard. They sort of tax that more when they're figuring out the EFC. The number of people in the household and the number in the household in college. But let's take a realistic look at the EFC. This is a quick reference to the EFC. So if you look at the AGI, and so let's say your family makes less than 30,000. your expected family contribution will be 0. As it goes up, 100,000, 16,000, 17,000 approximately, 150, 33,000. And as you could see on the right-hand side, it goes up pretty quickly. So anybody who makes over 150, we get to 190, that they're already expecting you to contribute 47,500. And after that, middle class is different to different people in the country, different college admissions. So the next form that people fill out is the CSS profile. Now that is the form that most people fill out, and that is used almost exclusively by private colleges and universities. And it determines how much non-financial federal financial aid you need. Over 300 colleges use this, and it is much more extensive than the FAFSA. They ask questions about your cars, about your homes, your equity. So it's much more extensive. If you want to get a good idea as far as what you would pay, and you could do this on your own time, you could go to every college. Every college has on their website a net price calculator. It provides a personal estimate of what a family will pay for 1 year in college. The cost of college minus scholarships and grants equals the net price. So you could go to 5 different colleges and they will all give you a different a different price. So it's a good idea before one starts applying to schools is to see the cost from that particular college. These are colleges that meet 100% of need. It's quite an extensive list. When I say meeting 100% of need, let's say your expected family contribution is 0, the colleges will meet 100% of that need. The only problem with this, or not a problem, just the reality of this, is that also includes loans that they will give you, okay? It is not free money. The next slide, colleges that meet 100% need without loans. As you could see, it's a lot smaller list, and these are colleges that you probably have heard of. And the Ivy Leagues, who have fabulous endowments, give the most amount of money. So these are colleges that need 100% of need without loans. Of course, if you're the higher income is, you won't have that much need according to the colleges. So let's just talk about college grants and scholarships. The average tuition discount at private schools is 51%. So if you don't fill out the FAFSA, and whatever the net price is, you will pay the full fare, the full cost of the college. It's very important to fill out the FAFSA and the CSS profile. Private schools must compete with less expensive state schools. Private schools can be less expensive than the state schools. Also, private colleges, their rate of graduation for students is much higher than state colleges. Private colleges use grants to compete among themselves for attractive prospects. They want as much diversity in their school as possible, academic, social. And so they will give you money, merit money, for you to come to their schools. And we're going to talk about a little while about how they go about doing this. And the thought process psychologically is the more expensive a college is, the better. Colleges will raise their tuition and then discount. Private scholarships, and even though it's a small percent, you could, if you go about it the right way, you could get a fair share of the private scholarships. This is a picture of myself and my daughter, and she was in the 20th percentile at her school. And she received $8,000 the senior night, more than any other student. Why? Because she applied for the scholarships. Most of them, a vast majority of them, she didn't receive, but she did get $8,000 worth of private scholarships. And we have a list of all scholarships that are available for you to consider. Now I have this photograph of US and News Report. This is kind of the Bible in terms of ranking of the schools. I don't put much stock into the ranking of the schools, but the higher the colleges are ranked in US and News Report, the more applications they get. So schools want to get higher on the list of US News rankings. Who receives merit money? Now this is by SAT score, but also by ACT as well. And I want to say now, even though you've heard that practically every college for the fall of 21, it's test optional. If you have the choice to take the SAT or the ACT, please do so. If your score isn't that good, you don't have to submit it. But if your score is good, and if you want to receive merit money, and this is the best way to receive merit money, you submit your score. As you can see, the higher your score is, the more you get. The deal is that you apply to schools where you are above their profile. Boosting your chances. Students are more likely to win greater awards from colleges if they apply strategically to colleges. Utilizing Naviance, and if you don't know what Naviance is, we're going to talk about it. The hazards of reach schools, the geographic hook, and early decision. Out-of-state merit aid. For some of you, this may be in-state, but these are schools that cut prices for top non-residents, some of the major state universities around the country. Why do they do this? Because they want the diversity of students from all states. Appealing your award. Once you get your award, it isn't set in stone. What the financial aid formulas try to do is put everyone in square boxes, pin it to a grid and say, this is how much money you need to go to a college or our college. So what the appeals process does is it allows the families to explain why they're no square. You could, almost everyone who I have worked with has been successful in getting additional monies from the college. You could show letters from schools where you have gotten more money, and even though this is a school that you want to go to, if this other school is $20,000, $30,000 less, that's significant. So your number one school will probably give you additional monies. So let's talk about admissions now. Increasing admissions odds. Anthony spoke earlier about the most competitive schools. These are the Ivies. These and 30 other schools, it's totally different in terms of how you apply to these schools. From the time you're a first-year student in high school, you have to be successful. As you go on, taking as many APs as possible, being involved in as many activities. You have to make yourself stand out to get accepted to any of these 30 schools, the Ivies, the top liberal arts schools, and research schools. So that's like 30 different colleges. And we would help you to try to make yourself stand out. With that said, this is the acceptance rate for the Ivy League colleges. The column acceptance, that's the overall acceptance rate. As you can see, it's very small. Regular, this is the regular admission rate for these colleges. I mentioned before about early decision. Early decision is when you declare that Brown or Dartmouth or any other school is a school that you want to go to. You could only do this for one school. You could see here that the admission rates for students who applied for early decision for these schools is more than double the regular admission rate. So this is one of the only times where I recommend, if you're going to apply for if you are going to apply for one of the most competitive schools, it's worthwhile to consider applying early decision. So this is, for those of you who are new to the process, this is the way the admissions work. There is regular decision, which has a specified date, and you receive a decision in a clearly stated period of time. Rolling admissions, which most state colleges use, they review the applications as they come in. Early action, students apply early and receive a decision well in advance of the institution's regular response date. And if you could get your application in by most cases, November 1st, November 15th, I would highly recommend that you use early action for most of your decisions. Early decision, which we just talked about, you makes a commitment to your first choice institution, where if admitted, they definitely will enroll. And then there is, it's not commonly used, I'm not sure how many schools have it, but restrictive early action. Students apply to an institution of preference and receive a decision early, and then you have until May 1st to decide to go there. What is the disadvantage of applying early decision? If you're not going to an Ivy school, and that is clearly your number one choice, you lose the ability to negotiate with the schools for less tuition and fees, because you are committing to that school early. That is the trade-off there. Boosting your chances. Solid academic fits, which are more likely to award merit money. Looking beyond the geographic region, naviance, students are more likely to win greater awards from colleges if they apply strategically to college. The hazards of reach schools and showing your interest in a school. Before I go to the next slide, let me just comment on the hazards of reach schools. Most guidance counselors say, okay, apply to your safety school, a realistic school, and 2 reach schools. Well, if you get accepted into your reach school, you're not going to get any money. There's no reason for the college to give you any money. So that is one of the disadvantages of applying to reach schools. This is just an example from my local high school of this past year. I want to show you where the students, the high school seniors, are going. New Jersey, 125, New York, Pennsylvania, Florida, the East Coast, and 3 in California. So this is pretty typical. I've worked in 4 high schools, and this is typical wherever you live in the country. Most people go to their region. If you have the capability and would consider going to other schools outside of the coast, you will get more money given to you. If a college in New York or Pennsylvania has a student from Wyoming who applies, there's not many students who do that. Likewise, a school in Wisconsin, Nebraska, or anywhere out there, if a student from New Jersey or Pennsylvania applies, your chances are significantly increased. This is Naviance. For those of you who are not familiar with Naviance, don't let this scare you at first sight, but this is the best tool to come around in the last 10 years. So most high schools have Naviance. When you open it up to your student's page, you will see the student's name there with here it is, with a little circle. This is where the student is at. They have every student who has graduated from that particular high school for the last 10 years or longer now. And it will compare you. The squares are accepted students, the X's are rejected students. If you're anywhere besides the top 30 schools, if you're anywhere near the acceptance area, they will omit you, and I'll explain in the next couple of slides. As you could see, right below the line here, a student got accepted. They were not above the line, and they got accepted because the colleges need you more than you need them. Now, this is a slide which scares a lot of people. Let's look at it. College admissions submitted. This is New Jersey state colleges. And this is, if you go to campus, this is what they will tell you. Applications, 41,000. Only 7,311 are enrolled. College of New Jersey, which is the most competitive school in New Jersey, putting Princeton aside, almost 14,000 applications they received, and only 1,600 enrolled. And Montclair, close to 13,000 and 3,000 enrolled. So this is what most people see, and it's scary. Wow, how am I going to get into these schools with these type of odds? What the colleges do not tell you is the following. Out of say Rutgers, 41,000 students applied, 25,000 were admitted. In College of New Jersey, 13,824, 6,800 admitted. And at Montclair, close to 13,000, there were, and 3,000 were admitted. They accepted 12,700. No, let me just, yes, they accepted 9,713. So take a look at this. And besides the 30 top most competitive schools in the country, every other school is like that. Every school in the country admits between 3 and 8 students for every 1 student that enrolls. You always hear how there's more applications every year. The colleges are getting more applications. That is true, but they're getting them from less students. How is that possible? With the Common App, 10 years ago, before the Common App, 12 years ago, it would take me as a guidance counselor 30 to 45 minutes to process one application. The Common App came along and I could process 50 in 5 minutes. So students are applying to more and more colleges. The colleges have to accept more and more students. Why? Because they need to accept more and more students to get their enrollment. As you could see, Rutgers, 1 out of every 4 students who were accepted decided to go. College of New Jersey, the most competitive school in New Jersey, 1 out of 5. And Montclair, I think this is a little off, but I think it's more like 4 students accepted for every 1 that enrolled. So, except for the 30 most competitive colleges, which is its own unique way of applying, which we help you to do, the most fabulous schools in the country, and there are over 3,500 schools in the country. I say there's 500 great schools, admit between 3 to 8 students for every student who decides to enroll. You are in the driver's seat. This is the same thing with schools. These are 3 of the most popular schools that people apply to outside of New Jersey. That's the reason why I have it listed here. Delaware, Binghamton, and Maryland, the same thing. The colleges will show you 26 applications. You will get scared when you only see 4,600 people applied. Same thing with Binghamton and Maryland, but then you see they accepted 18,000 and 4,000 decided to go in Delaware, 2,700 out of 13,000, and 5,000 out of 15,000 in Maryland. So there's no reason to be scared or stressed out when applying to these schools. If you just apply to the Ivy League schools, the odds are you will not be accepted. You need to apply to excellent schools where you'll know that you will be accepted, in addition to the Ivy Leagues. Show the college some love. Demonstrated interest. This goes for the Ivy Leagues as well as other colleges. Attend the virtual seminars that they are doing. The next slide, I will show you the ones that they're having right now. Hardly any students, and I recommend this certainly for the most competitive schools, hardly any students send thank you notes, email or regular notes, and these people on the front lines who go visit the high schools, who are involved in the decision-making process, they appreciate if you send them a thank you note. Of course, this year is not the best year for college visits, but there are virtual tours, discussions, etc.
Charles, we're getting a few questions, and since we're sort of coming towards the end, some of the questions that we're actually getting are pertaining to demonstrated interest. So I think maybe what we should do is do a quick panel discussion. One more time for any of the parents that have been joining us, thank you for sort of hanging in there thus far. We hope you found everything that Charles was mentioning rather informative. You're more than welcome to contact us at info@embracetutoring.com if you want to set up a more personalized consultation. What Charles and I are going to do now is a quick panel discussion. I'm going to read through some of the major questions that we have. And then at the same time, if we need to perhaps go back to a slide where we can elaborate on something, we'd be happy to do so to kind of bring a little bit more clarification.